Now, there are times when I look at Dana White and I think, man, this dude has the best job in the world. Just going out there, flying around all these different places, putting out some of these major fights, being around the fighters, being around the events, being right there ringside to see everything happen firsthand. Like, how could you not love it? That sounds like it would just be absolutely amazing. But then there's times when I look at him and I think, ooh, the last thing in the world I would want to do is that man's job, right? And sometimes when I'm thinking that thought, I find that it's because he's dealing with Nate Diaz, right? Nate Diaz doesn't exactly seem like he's the easiest guy to work with. Doesn't exactly seem like he's the guy that's going to be the easiest to get deals done with. We heard recently, I want to say it's rumors, it's been verified by too many people. This man came up to Dana White and asked him for a fight with Francis Ngannou. Said that's one of the fights I'm interested in. Right, with a straight face. Now, what would you say to that? How would you respond when Nate Diaz, a guy who's really truly a 155er, doesn't like to cut weight, competes at 170, comes to you and says, look, man, this is the last fight on my contract. You guys aren't giving me what I'm looking for. You're messing around. You're doing this. You're doing that. Just let me sign this fight with Francis Ngannou, and we're gonna both move on with our lives. I mean, that's kind of crazy, right? So imagine being Dana White and just having to deal with all these things, and you got like 500 fighters on the roster, dude, like 500 different personalities and everything else you got to deal with. So it's a tall order. Now, going into this fight with Nate Diaz, it's always going to be something, right? Anytime you see Nate building up to a fight, coming into a fight, potentially talking about a fight, you're always hearing about a lot of different things going on. You're never exactly sure how things are going to shake out. And we heard a lot of names getting tossed around this time. Where we're going to see this potential trilogy with Conor McGregor, where we're going to see him in there with, one of these other top welterweights. How are things going to play out? Were we going to, somehow, some way, we're going to get a rematch with Masvidal? Like, what was going to shake with this? Right? This is the last fight on the man's contract. We heard Chimaev's name tossed around. We heard Khamzat Chimaev tossed around a long time ago. And it seemed to me that was kind of dismissed for a variety of reasons, right? We know Khamzat wanted it, right? If you're that guy, you're just this young, hungry dude with this incredible amount of hype behind you. You're coming in there and you're just a beast tearing through people. How would you not love the idea of fighting Nate Diaz, right? How would you not love that idea? Because let me frame this for you just for 1 second here, for the sake of the people who weren't necessarily fans of MMA or the UFC back in 2009, 2010, 2011. Maybe you came into the sport a little bit more recently, relatively recently. So maybe if that's the case, you're not quite sure what all the hype is and what all the buzz is with a guy like Nate Diaz. You think, I don't know, he seems cool enough. I saw him beat Conor McGregor once. That was slick. He's got a few little promos that he cuts that I like his personality or his sense of humor or whatever the case may be, like the way he fights. All right. But if you came in and you first came into MMA within the last 5-7 years, you're probably more than likely one of those people. Not really getting what it's about. Now, I have the privilege, I'll say, because that's how it feels. It feels like a privilege to have been watching this sport develop for so long. So I remember back before Nate Diaz was even a big thing, Nick Diaz was. I remember him back in Strikeforce, man. I remember when the Diaz brothers were, they were like, they were like the biggest thing ever in a lot of ways, right? Now, I don't want to use that necessarily. I mean, obviously, we got guys like Chuck Liddell and we got GSP and we've got Anderson Silva and all kinds of stuff, but the Diaz brothers were incredibly popular. Incredibly popular. Nate Diaz, it was like you got to watch him grow up in the octagon in a lot of ways. All right, well, you saw what he was doing back there against Gomi, even when he beat Donald Cerrone. All of these guys that he was tearing through back in the day when he put out Marcus Davis with the choke. Just all different kinds of stuff that we saw this man do. When we saw him on The Ultimate Fighter, it was great stuff. He had just a way of endearing himself to you. You just end up loving watching him fight. You see him and it's almost like you could watch, like it's your neighbor. There's some professional athletes that you look at and you're like, well, I don't really know anybody like that. Not necessarily that you can't relate to him, but it's just you don't see it in your everyday life. Man, Nate Diaz looks like he could be a guy, the UPS driver. And oh, by the way, he just happens to be a world-class fighter and he'll knock your head off. Doesn't come out there and he's all polished. He's not worried necessarily about what the media thinks. He's constantly 100% himself, truly authentic. And I, just like so many other people, love it. Right? He is just a tough guy. He's just a fighter. Man, he's just from the neighborhood. And he just wants to go out there and get it done, fights the toughest guys in the division. So when they offer him Chimaev, didn't take him too long, and eventually we find ourselves here. And now it's fight week. And we get Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev. I don't think this one's going to go well at all for Nate. Look, man, the guy is a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. We've seen him pull off some great submissions in the octagon. We've heard all kinds of other ththings that he's done and training stories and this and that. I don't even think it's going to come into play here. And if Khamzat gets on top of him, I don't think he's got anything coming in the regards of submissions. I don't think he's going to be pulling off some leg lock. I don't think he's going to be able to sweep Chimaev from bottom. I don't think he's going to be able to do any of that. I think he's going to get pounded on should he find himself in bottom position. I don't think his takedown defense is going to be able to stand up to what Chimaev brings. Man, that dude is an animal. You think about the way that we saw him do things. Think about when he went in there against Li Jingliang. The way he snatched that dude up and all the different little twists and turns he made and able to get his back while he's talking to Dana White and pounding him, slamming him on his neck, and ended up pounding him out of there. Think about what he did against Gilbert Burns. Didn't even have to rely on the wrestling as much as you would think, or the grappling, however you want to put it, because that control. But he came out there and did the striking as though it wasn't enough that he went out and knocked out Mearshart with one straight right hand right to the jaw, backed him up against the cage, boom, out of there. He's still developing. He's still progressing. He's incredibly hungry. And he's got this dominating, smothering wrestling style that people just really, for the most part, haven't figured out how to deal with yet. You look back at Khabib. You look at what Islam Makhachev is doing. Like when guys got this smothering type style and they're really good at it, they haven't quite figured it out yet. Right? We haven't seen a blueprint yet for how to beat somebody like that at that version of their game. I mean, if you can beat them striking, that's way different. But we're talking about their grappling because the reason I bring it up is this is going to become a grappling match. Nate Diaz isn't going to be able to stay on the outside with his boxing and use his footwork and work the jab and keep Khamzat off of him or anything like that. He's not. We know he's not using kicks. As a matter of fact, Nate's the guy who usually gets his legs destroyed by people, barely even checking kicks. Okay. And let's not forget one other thing while we're talking about all this. Right now we're talking about the skill set, and I just don't think it matches up well. Although I will say this, Nate has tremendous cardio, and should this fight go into the 4th or the 5th round, he may have the edge. May have the edge. We haven't seen Chimaev there yet, so we don't know how he's going to respond in those later rounds. But maybe his cardio is awesome. Maybe it's not. We know Nate could fight 8 rounds. Okay? We've seen him do good work late. Think about that shot that he got against Leon Edwards. So he may absolutely have that. He may have the work rate advantage. He may have, or which kind of plays into cardio. He may have the ability going late and have the advantage in the championship rounds. Kind of remains to be seen. But right now we're talking about the skills, right? But let's not forget one other thing. Nate Diaz isn't even a true welterweight. Nate Diaz doesn't really even have any business competing at 170 pounds. Look at his record when he's been competing at 170. You got to go back a long. He's only got 2 wins in recent memory at 170. Anthony Pettis, which I believe that was at 170 pounds. Okay? Conor McGregor, they're in their first fight. Before that, you got to go back pretty far for him to get a win back at 170. Because he's not a 170-pound fighter. He's a 155-pound fighter. And oh, by the way, those 2 wins that he got at 170 pounds in recent memory, when we're talking about Pettis and when we're talking about Conor McGregor, both those guys are 155-pounders too, who were also just blown up to 170, and that's where they happened to fight. So it was 2 155ers that happened to be competing at 170. Man, Khamzat is a real, true 170-pounder who's good enough to be able to compete at 185 against some guys. That's how beastie that dude is. So we're getting in older Nate Diaz, and Nate Diaz who I feel his skill set does not match up well at all. He's not as hungry and as ferocious and as aggressive. He's the smaller man. Now Nate's tall. He's not exactly a small guy, but I don't think there's any way Khamzat would be able to go out there and make 155. Nate can. So I'm putting him down as the smaller man in that regard. So on top of it, he's the smaller guy. Like, I think this is a recipe for absolute disaster. It's the last fight on his contract. Not exactly happy about it. Like, dude, I like Chimaev. I want to see everything that he brings to the table and everything that he does, and I'm super excited and looking forward to seeing how this man matches up against better and better competition. I think there's every reason to believe that he's going to be a future belt holder. Right? Could be an incredibly dominant champion depending on how focused he stays and how disciplined he is, right? Remains to be seen, but you see all the potential there in the world. Nate Diaz is a man who's at the end of his career. This is it, man. He may not even re-up on this contract after that. I could have swore I read the other day that he started his own fight promotion. So you got to figure that he's going to be putting his energy into something else. So that's what they're giving this man, an absolute cornerstone of the organization, an icon. When you put the Diaz name, particularly when you bring his brother into it, man, these guys have done so much for MMA, so much for the UFC. And they're just giving him an absolute assassin on his way out the door. So I'm not exactly happy about it in that regard. I think Nate's going to go out there and take a pretty big beating. Don't see it going 5 rounds. So should his cardio should he have the better cardio in the 4th and 5th round? I don't even think we're going to find out. I think Khamzat's going to go out there and he's going to put it on him, man. I think it's going to be ugly. When Nate succeeds, when Nate's able to win, when you see him at his best, he's able to beat guys up on the feet with his boxing, right? He's got this style with this throwing punches kind of at half speed, half power, and he's but an incredible work rate, and he's able to get it out, put it on guys, get them in a bad spot, land 1 or 2 hard shots, and then able to implement some grappling. And I just don't see any way possible that that's going to work out here. Vegas sees it the way I do, obviously. They got Khamzat at like a 12-1, 13-1 favorite. And honestly, there's probably still value in that line in the sense that Khamzat should be a bigger favorite than that. So, hate to say it, right? I don't feel good talking about how Nate Diaz, I'm expecting him to go out there and get his head torn off. But it's funny. I saw a video with Chael Sonnen. I was listening to it. And he said, the promo for this fight, right? The marketing all around Vegas. You should just see posters. Have Khamzat's face. So have Nate Diaz's face. And all it says is, what if? What if? That's all it says. Nothing else. Maybe the date. But think about that. What if? What if Nate Diaz is able to get this win? A lot of people thought Leon Edwards had no chance against Usman. He was able to go in there, get whooped for 4.5 rounds for the most part, right? Or maybe he won a round before that. But then he was able to come out there and he was able to win with that head kick in a fight that he was 100% losing. A fight that if that would have went to the judges, he clearly would have lost it. But he's able to pull out the victory. So what if? If he's able to do that against Usman, who's to say that Nate Diaz can't pull off something against Chimaev? And make no mistake about it. Nate Diaz is a very skilled fighter. If you're talking about in the realm of possibilities, absolutely he could win this fight. Absolutely he could go out there and he could just land that shot. It just happens to land correctly, stumbles him for a second, catches Chimaev in a choke, gets him out of there, right? But that's what happens when you're skilled. We're not talking about Chimaev going out there and fighting a 5th grader where he actually really truly has no chance of losing. We're talking about Nate Diaz. But at the same time, when we're sitting here making predictions, when we're talking about possibly putting money on it, we need to be honest with ourselves. Nate Diaz does not have a good chance of winning this fight. So let me know what you guys think. Are you excited to see what Chimaev brings? What do you think is going to be the next one for him? Should he come out with the victory on this one as a lot of us expect him to? Are you happy with Nate Diaz even getting this fight, or did you want to see him get something else kind of on his swan song out the door? Something that, maybe the type of fight that they gave like a Donald Cerrone or something like that, where it's like it's a little bit easier. Maybe it's an old guy just like you. You're going to be on your way out the door. We're not going to sit here and run you through some meat grinder and have the last thing that people see of you, in the middle of the octagon, laid out flat on your back with some big old cut. Because let's not forget about all that scar tissue Nate Diaz has. High probability every single fight we see cut wide open, spurting blood out of his face. So is that the last thing that we want to see? I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, but maybe everybody else is. So let me know what you guys think.